Well, hello there, and welcome to the first instalment in your People revision notes. I'm going to talk today about human resources, organisational structures and different types of working. So human resources, which is really what the people topic is all about, is the function or department that identifies what are the employment needs of the organisation, and then they meet those needs, those employment needs. How do they do this? Well, they manage the organisational structure, which I'll talk about in a minute. They manage communications. They carry out recruitment and selection tasks. They aim to retain staff by motivating them and making them feel good about being at work. They train and develop staff, and they manage employment law to make sure that it's legal and ethical what's going on in the workplace. So, I'm going to talk about organisational structures. Now, why do we need to organise a business? It's because we want to know who's telling who to do what and who takes the orders. So who gives the orders and who takes the orders, so that you know clearly who's responsible for which job, who's responsible for passing on messages, who do I need to ask if I've got a problem or I need some help. A span of control is how many workers a manager has responsibility for. And a chain of command is who tells what to do. So a manager might have a span of control of 3, and the channel of communication is such that the senior manager tells them what to do, and then that manager tells the 3 people who report into her or him what to do. It's hard to describe without diagrams, so make sure you're having a look at your end of unit notes while I'm talking. The chain of command, I've talked about channels of communication. So the chain of command is orders going backwards and forwards up and down the organisation, and that goes through the channels of communication. And I've always used the example of school, and if Mr. Solly as the head wants to pass something down to the rest of the staff, he could pass it on to the assistant principals, and then they pass it on to the heads of department, who then pass it on to the other teachers. If I've got a problem, I would go to my line manager, Mr. Rhodes. I wouldn't go straight to Mr. Solly, because if everybody did that, Mr. Solly would never have time to drink a cup of tea, let alone do any other work. And a more senior member of staff can delegate tasks to somebody more subordinate than them. So Mr. Solly can ask Mr. Rhodes to do something for him, because Mr. Rhodes is more junior to him in the organisation. Mr. Rhodes can ask me to do something for him, because he's more senior to me. And it's called delegation when you ask somebody to do a job for you. Now, the benefits of having a tall structure, which is otherwise known as a hierarchical structure with lots of layers of management, is that we can control things more easily. I know that if I've got a small span of control, I can keep an eye on what those workers are doing for me. The responsibility is kept in the hands of senior managers. So everybody at the bottom doesn't really have much say in what goes on, and they don't have the responsibility. The senior managers make the decisions and pass them on to those below them. And it's useful to have a tall structure when you need to control your workers and tell them what to do, when the job doesn't really involve the workers having much input in what's going on. Whereas a flat structure is where you have one senior manager with a wide span of control, so they'll have lots of people reporting into them. It's quicker to communicate because there's less layers of management. There's less layers or less people for the messages to go through. If you think about Chinese whispers, when the message gets passed through lots of people, the message can often get changed, can't it? So if you've got a flat structure, then it can be easier to get messages around the business. Each manager has more responsibility because they've got a wider span of control. So if you ask the manager, they might say that's a good thing or a bad thing. And then your workers can feel as if they're more involved in decision making and have more responsibility. I'm going to stop there, and I shall talk about ways of working in the next exciting instalment.